Welcome to the Living Well Church podcast, and thanks for tuning in today. Our mission as a church is to help people find faith in Jesus and a life of purpose and hope. You're about to watch a message that will challenge you, inspire you, encourage you, and most of all, point you to Jesus and the life of purpose and hope He has planned for you. So lean in and enjoy, and let God speak into your life.
Morning, and welcome also if you're watching us online this morning. New, eh? You noticed? Yeah. We're in a series at the moment called Know Who You Are, and I really believe that this is a really important series because I believe this is the question of our age. Who actually are we? This morning I'm going to look at the aspect of how did I get here, but this is all tied up with identity. This is all tied up with who am I? How did I get here? What is the purpose of life? How do all these things work together? And there is a great search for identity. How did I get here? Sometimes we ask that question when we get ourselves into a situation and we think, how did I get here? What events happened that brought me to this point? But I think there's a deeper level than that as well, where we actually get to the point of what is life about? How did I get here? Who am I? And those questions relate to things like a personal sense of who we are, a sense of belonging. Do we actually belong in this world? Do we belong with the people that we're with? And as I say, I truly believe this is one of the issues of our age and our generation. There would be people that would say, I got here because of just random chance. Somehow this little planet in this universe had the right conditions that life would evolve, and by random chance that evolved into humanity and that evolved into me. There would be people who would say that is what I believe. That's who I think I am. That's where I think I came from. There would be other people who would say how I got here is to do with a chain of events. That I was born into this family, in these circumstances, and that's how I got here. I belong in this family situation. I belong in this locality. I belong in this ethnic group. That I just belong because of a chain of events has led me to this point. And people will genuinely believe that is where, that's what they believe, how they got here. There are other people who would think it's actually irrelevant where I came from because I am here now, and what I do is where my identity comes from. What I choose is where my identity comes from. So I can choose to think that I am British. I can choose to think I'm English. I can choose to think that I belong to this sort of people. I can choose to think that I belong to this family or this location. And even today, one of the greatest issues of today would even be about choosing gender. That actually what has gone before is irrelevant. I am here now and I want to choose my gender amongst other things. And there were people that would believe that is where they are and what they're doing. And then there would be some other people who would have some sense of, I got here because of some sort of destiny. That there is a greater power out there, and somehow that greater power has lined things up that mean that at this point in time, this is where I am, this is who I am, and it's It's because of purpose. It's because of creation. Now, in that category of people, there would be a really wide divergence of what those people would believe, and various different religions maybe would point to different things about what they believe in that area. But there is this general area of people thinking, yeah, there is something greater than me out there. I don't control everything, and I'm going to name it a certain way for what I think it is. So all those four thoughts are really common thoughts that people have. And they're all legitimate thoughts for those people. That's what they believe. And whatever you think, that's what they believe. And that actually then affects their behaviors. What they believe then affects their behaviors. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to look at what does the Bible speak into this. And again, people might say, well, to be honest, to me, that's irrelevant what the Bible says, because I think or believe this. My personal view would be that I have found the Bible to be an amazing guide to my life, an enlightenment, a way to go, a way of understanding who I am and why I'm here. And we're just going to look at some verses from Psalm 139. And there's just three things we're going to pull out of these verses, which I think are going to help us understand this idea about where did I come from and therefore who am I? Psalm 139, and we're going to read from verse 13. You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know that. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion, as I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. So King David wrote this psalm, and King David would have written this psalm on the basis of his personal experience, but also he would have been referring back to the book of Genesis and his understanding of where he came from, that there was a God who created humanity. There was a God who created him. And he references that as he talks about this, and he says, that's where I came from. That's how I got here, because there was a God, there is a God who created me, and who created me with a unique identity. We are all different. And when you read through those verses, you see some significant things there. One of them is that none of us is a mistake. We are all unique. We have all been created in the image of God. And Joe next week is going to talk about that a bit more, but we are not mistakes. We are not failures. We are created in the image of God. And we are therefore we are significant. And those verses go on to say, not only are we significant, but that God has a plan and a purpose for our life. It says, every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. We are not here randomly. Our life is not just a mess or a muddle that we try and search our way through, try and find a path through. God has a plan and purpose for our life, and it's for good. It's for good things. The second thing we're going to look at in this psalm is we're going to read some verses from Psalm 139, verses 1 to 6. And it says this: O Lord, you have examined my heart, and you know everything about me. You know when I sit down or stand up. You know my thoughts even when I'm far away. You see me when I travel and when I rest at home. You know everything I do. You know what I'm going to say even before I say it, Lord. You go before me and you follow me. You place your hand of blessing on my head. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too great for me to understand. And these verses again go on to talk about the fact that God knows us. You are known to God. You are not so insignificant that he doesn't know who you are. You are known to God. You have a name. He knows your name. You are important to him. And God knows about you because he cares. You see, you could read those verses and think, that sounds a bit like Big Brother, that God is watching me. He's watching everything I do. Is he trying to catch me out? What's he trying to, is he snooping on me? You could read them in that light, but that isn't the light that they're written in. They're written, and the thing is they're based on the fact that God loves us. When my adult children come home from work, I ask them, how was your day? I ask them because I love them, I'm interested in them, I want to know what they've been doing. I don't ask them to check up on them of what they've been doing, or did you actually go to work today? That isn't my heart. That is not God's heart for us. He's not checking up on us. He's engaged with us because he loves us, and he wants to be involved in our life. He wants to be in relationship with us. That's it. That's his heart. That's his desire. And those verses also go on to say that we are never alone. Now, there are times when we may feel alone. There are times when maybe there are no people around us. But God says we are never alone, that he is with us all the time. It talks here about you could travel to the ends of the earth. God would still be with you there. You are never alone. And we're just going to look at a few more verses. Going to look at verse 5 again, which says, you place your hand of blessing on my head. And then verses 17 and 18. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God. They cannot be numbered. I can't even count them. They outnumber the grains of sand. And when I wake up, you are still with me. God has good thoughts about us. Just like us as parents would have some comprehension about how we have good thoughts and good desires for our children, that is something of what God's heart is like for us, and that we are valuable to him, that we are not worthless, we are not failures, we are valuable to him, and his greatest desire is that we would be in relationship with him, that we would relate to him, that we would allow him to be part of our lives. That's God's greatest desire. And it says here that God is constantly thinking about you. And again, that's a constantly thinking about you in a positive way, not a constantly thinking about you thinking, what a mess are they making again now? And not thinking, he's done it again. I knew he was going to do that. God isn't thinking about us like that. God is thinking about us because he loves us. And his heart is for us. Do you remember when you had a new girlfriend or a new boyfriend, and in those first few days and weeks, you can think of nothing else? They are constantly in your mind. They are so important that they're at the front of your mind all the time. That's something of what God is saying here, that we are so valuable to him, that we're constantly in his mind. He's constantly looking out for us. He's constantly looking over us. He's so for us. And we need to understand that. As I say, sometimes life feels lonely. Sometimes life feels a mess. Sometimes life feels disappointing. But God is for us. God is over us. God is constantly thinking about us and waiting for us often in those situations to turn and just recognize that he's actually there. These verses finish by saying, when I wake up, you are still with me. This is not a dream that fades away when you wake up to the reality of life. God is with us all the time. He's reality, with us when we're awake as well as when we're asleep. So how do we apply what I've been talking about this morning? What I want you to leave with today is this. To know, and that's to believe as well. It's just not to think of something as I know this fact, but this is to know, this is also to believe, because what we believe affects our behavior. To know, to believe that you are not an accident, and your identity doesn't come from your gender, your class, your family, your circumstances, your work, where you live, where you were born, what colour your skin is. That's not where your identity comes from. Your identity is as a child of God. If we can grasp that, it will transform how we live. If we can grasp and believe that we are really, truly children of God, that's where we fit in, that God is for us, that we are known, that we are not strangers to God, that he knows us intimately, and that his desire is that we would belong to him, that we would belong to each other as well as a church, but we would belong to him and relate to him and spend time with him. And to know that actually when we are with him, we're home. Home's really important, isn't it, for all of us? That place that we call home. And God is saying through these verses, when you come to me, when you relate to me, when you accept that you're my child, you are home. It's where you belong. It's where you fit. But you might say, but you don't understand my background. You don't understand my childhood. You don't understand the mess I'm in at the moment. You don't understand what my life is like. We have to stop thinking like that. We have to stop believing that is our identity. And I know as I say that, some people will think, but Marcus, you have no idea what my life is like. And it's actually an insult for you to say that, because you don't know what my life is like. And there's an element of truth that I do not know what your life is like. And I know that by saying what I've just said, some people will now switch off and not listen to anything else I say, because in some ways it's offensive what I've said, because it seems to demean the struggles of life. The reason I say that is, you're right that I don't understand, but I know there's only one hope for you, and that's Jesus. Because in all those things that are going on, you are never going to sort those out yourself. You're never going to extricate yourself from some of these situations. You're never going to be able to extricate yourself from your history. The only hope we have is Jesus. And he knows, and he is able. And the question is, will we be offended, or will we let him in and allow him to do something in our heart and our spirit? I am absolutely convinced that my life is better because Jesus is in it. I don't know what my life would be like without Jesus. Because in some ways I can give you an impression that I'm quite sorted and that life has not been a complete disaster. Some of the things have been okay. But I know that if things were left to me and my control, my life would be a complete mess. And I know that having Jesus in it is the difference. And that's what I just want to leave with you really this morning, is the fact that when we think like this, when we think about these are the issues that I'm dealing with. This is what my life is like. Some of these things, the only way we're ever going to resolve that is by allowing Jesus in to actually deal with and help us deal with those things. And sometimes we think we're not good enough for that. Sometimes we think that we're too damaged, or that God doesn't care about us, that we've made too many mistakes. But I just want to tell you really clearly that God is for you. And he is the answer. And knowing him will help you understand who you are. Because as I started with, there's lots of ways that we try and make sense of who we are and where we came from. I believe it's Jesus that makes sense of who we are and where we came from. And you may be here today and thinking, well, I don't know who this Jesus is. I don't know who you're talking about. Around the communion table, Johnny was telling us about Jesus, who was God, who was this God in Psalm 139 that became human and dwelt amongst us and died so that we could once again be relating back to God. And this morning, if you don't know that Jesus, you can know that Jesus. We're going to play a song shortly. It's a Hillsong song, and it's called Who You Say I Am. I'm just going to read you some of the verses. We're going to play it a little bit later. But it says this: who the Son sets free is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. That sentence there is so significant. In my Father's house, there is a place for me. There may be places that you think you don't fit in. In God's house, there is a place for you. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. See, our mind would tell us that's all very well, but there's all these things, all these failures, problems, hurts, whatever. But it's who God says we are. I'm chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. What I want you to do as you leave here today is to put into action this statement. And this statement says, I'm going to live knowing that I'm not an accident and that my identity doesn't come from gender or class or family or job or circumstances or location or colour or anything else, but I'm going to live knowing that my identity comes from being a child of God. And that's where I fit, that's where I belong, that's where I'm known, that's home. So as we listen to this song now, I'm just going to ask you to bow your heads and just to reflect on what I've said, reflect on the words of this song, which are saying in a slightly different way what I've been speaking to you about this morning. And if you want some prayer this morning, then come down the front and people will pray with you. If you want prayer because you don't know Jesus, as we sing and as people's heads are bowed, come down the front and people will pray with you. If you know Jesus, but you're in a place where maybe some of these circumstances of life are just holding you down and you are not living in that freedom of knowing that Jesus is the center of your life, and that these other things have been put to the side because Jesus is the center, then come down and some people will pray with you as well. I really want us just to spend some time just to reflect on who God says we are, not who our internal voice in our head tells us we are on occasions. Let's bow and let's listen to the song.